Hi guys, I'll be playing a challenge with Janistone's Blue-Red Flicker deck. So recently there's been, Blue-Red Delver has been performing really well, and there's been, I guess there's been calls for like potentially some bannings. I guess, I don't really know how to comment on whether or not something should be banned, but I think there are decks that people aren't playing that could be good in the current meta, especially against Blue-Red Delver. So bigger blue-red decks are one of them. So if you look at kind of like the challenge meta, besides UB Alchemy, blue-black, there's a lot of Boros and Delver, and those decks have been doing well. And so in the Blue-Red Delver mirror, basically the side, it's a grindy matchup. So basically the deck that's slightly slower and slightly greedier has the edge. So you kind of want to be a bigger Blue-Red Delver deck. And that same strategy actually applies against Boros because it's another grindy matchup. So if you're a little bit slower, a little bit grindier, you also kind of do better against Boros. So yeah, so there's I think a bigger blue-red deck like this will do well against Boros and Delver. Of course, compared to Delver, it will suffer in a lot of other matchups. Like it's like way worse against Boggles. This deck probably can't beat Boggles. It's also a bit worse against Tron, though this deck can still beat Tron. And it's a bit worse against... it's probably a bit worse against Blue-Black, but it's still probably favored. Just because it's kind of a mirror matchup, and then you bring Pyre Blast in the from the board. If you look at this list, it's definitely worse against Inside Out, probably a little bit worse against Mono Blue. It's actually probably better against Dompy. But either way, so basically by playing this deck, you're exchanging some good matchups for some bad matchups. But in particular, this deck should probably be a little bit favored against Blue Delver. In general, I should mention that this deck is actually very strong. So Janicestone has been talking about that he's been his rating has been like above 1900 for a while playing this deck. So that kind of corresponds to around an 80% win rate in leagues, which is very impressive. And I played like 5 leagues with it, got like a 5-0 and a few 4-1. So I definitely believe believe what he's saying. So yeah, I think this is probably this is certainly so the 3 big blue-red Delver decks, big blue-red kind of like control-ish decks are you can play blue-red Delver without Delvers, you can play blue-red Pieces, or you can play this blue-red Flicker deck. And I think out of those 3. Blur Flicker has the best late game between like just the infinite value from Ghostly Flicker and Knockout, and I really like how this deck plays all these Sea Gates and other Boros. I think it makes the deck really smooth and also makes the deck like really good at just kind of like interacting with like blocking attackers, and there's a lot of tricks you can do with those in Ghostly Flicker. So yeah, I think this deck is very good. Kind of getting to more specifics. So one of the big things this deck is doing is it's playing 3 Brainstorms, which from playing Brainstorms are amazing. They're just cantrips, and cantrips are, and Pauper has the best cantrips, so having more good cantrips is always very good. It basically just makes you consistent at implementing your game plan. You get to choose the right card when you need it. So yeah, basically having extra preordains is amazing. And so the mana base is a little bit different. It plays a lot more fetches instead of just like dual lands, though it still plays Is It Boilerworks, because Is It Boilerworks is basically just a 2 lands in 1. Otherwise, this mana base is pretty smooth and not that greedy. Like, it's only playing 1 Radiant Fountain. You want 1 Radiant Fountain in your deck because you frequently draw a lot of cards, and at frequently in the late game you might want to just gain much of life, and so you just Ghostly Flicker, Arcane Mancer, and Radiant Fountain just gain much of life. So yeah. Overall, this deck, the main game plan is to just outvalue your opponent, and so this deck plays a lot of value. So we're talking 3 Sea Gates, 4 Augurs, 4 Mold Drifters, and then 1 Deep Analysis to kind of further fight that value game. So I think stuff like this is why this deck can probably do very well against Boros, Blur Delver, and Blue-Black Alchemy. And then there's even more value. This is like just a late game. Yeah, so yeah, this stuff is the reason why this deck, I believe, should probably be a bit favored against the 3 most played decks at the moment. In terms of interaction, I actually changed the numbers a little bit from Janicestone's list, he played a lot more sorcery speed removal, such as like fire bolts and flame slashes, which I think is probably very good in leagues because there's a lot more aggro decks and affinity stuff like that. In challenges, it's a lot more blue decks and I guess Boros, and so like things like flame slash aren't that good. So there's also a lot more tribe in challenges and a lot less tribe in leagues. And against tribe, sorcery speed removal is like terrible. So I swapped a lot of the sorcery speed removal for instant speed ones, so like lightning bolts and screds. Also added one harvest pyre, and then I kept Janicestone's pet card, Arc Lightning. This card is actually quite good. Well, I guess quite good is maybe a stretch. It's probably the weakest card in the deck, but it's I think it's probably better than Electricity. It's very clunky, but it kind of always does what you want it to do, so it's quite good. So I'm only left with 2 flame slashes, and then I added 1 dispel and then 4 counter spells. So this is just kind of like to reflect what I think the challenge meta will be. So yeah, so that's kind of the main deck. Basically, it's not really, you don't have to try to set up the flicker combo. It's just more of a value deck. You could almost certainly win before you deck against anything, even if you lose your value engine. So yeah. The plan of this deck is just to grind the opponent out, and so the games are going to take really long. Just as a warning. In the sideboard, there's a lot of stuff against control. So removal in general is bad against like things like against Blue-Black Alchemy and Tron, and so instead you're adding things like Relic and Pyroblast into Spell. So yeah, so against a lot of those controllers matchups, you're adding in a lot of stuff that's better than removal. And then I cut down on some of the Hydroblasts. I think I expect a lot less burn in challenges, and in general, I think Dispel is almost as good as a Hydroblast. That's one of the cuts I made. And so yeah, I cut down the Hydroblasts. I put the Flame Slash that I removed from main deck here as an extra removal spell. Might be good in some aggro matchups. And then I guess I'm playing. I'm keeping Janicestone's another pet card, Razorfin Hunter. I think this card is again quite good. Though I'm not entirely sure yet. It's good. It's good in a lot of matchups, like against Stompy, you can like ping stuff. It's quite good against Tribe. You can kind of make sure that like if they try to flip, you have another creature that can another thing that can potentially like stop them from coming off, and like if they don't flip, you just ping them and force them to discard. So yeah, and obviously good against mono blue, obviously good against Delver. Not that great against blue or Delver. I probably actually won't side it in, but I think it's still a pretty good card regardless. Actually, I think we'll side it in against Affinity, just because like if they have Flare Husks, this might be the difference. Actually, I'm not too sure about that, but I did side it in against Affinity, and it was all right. I added another Serrated Arrows. So I figured if my goal in playing this deck was to try to beat up on Blue or Delver, I might as well do it some more. And so Serrated Arrows is very good against Blue or Delver. It's hard to counter because like post board against something like this, they bring in like a bunch of Pyroblasts and things like that, and you could very easily sneak something like Serrated Arrows through. And once this is on the board, you kind of turn off a lot of their spell setters, which is probably the best card. And then this deck can also flicker it, so it's quite good. Also, probably very good against Tribe. Probably necessary against Tribe, because I think this deck probably has a very bad matchup, or the main deck certainly is not very good against Tribe. So something like Serrated Arrows is definitely very helpful for that matchup. And then, it's just good in a lot of other places, like it's probably fine against Elves, it's probably good against Mono Blue Delver, etc. 2 Electricity, these are kind of like necessary. These don't, like, even adding these doesn't beat Boggles. Like this deck just cannot beat Boggles, but this might help. Plus it's it's very good against Delver and things like Elves. And finally, 1 Miser Gorilla Shaman. So Affinity actually is played like Affinity. The meta share for Affinity in challenges is actually very low, unlike in leagues. So I actually don't expect to face a lot of affinity, which is why I cut down to 1. I'm keeping 1 because it's actually, I think drawing 1 copy against Boros is pretty nice. Like hitting. I mean, sometimes you can just screw Boros randomly, just win the game. But even in general, like just stone raiding a couple times, like pinning them on mana is not too bad. And I don't think you really want to draw 2 in this type of deck. So having 1 is fine because it's quite good against Boros and then amazing against Affinity. So yeah, that's a deck. It's fairly close. I mean, I basically copied Janistone's deck card for card to start with, and then just made some minor changes. So I guess if I don't do well, you can probably blame the changes I made. But hopefully this deck will perform as Janistone advertises. And yeah.